All right, George, we are live. Let's do it. Coming down in three, two, one. And welcome on into the post-game edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We are back here after, George, another loss in Jacksonville. The ice that I tried to melt and drink on Thursday's preview pod did not do any luck whatsoever, did not work anything, even just making it a close game. And for the ninth consecutive year, George, eighth in Jacksonville, it was a lot of ugliness and the same result, which was an L.
Yeah, a lot of similar things. Slow start, too many turnovers. Those have been really consistent hallmarks of this slump, and you saw it again out there. And I don't know, what it's going to take to turn this around. I don't know if there needs to be like an exorcism or what, but obviously the streak is going to get to 10 years at least.
It is. This has been. Yeah, this might be one of those games where I don't know, each and every year there's just no solving the Jacksonville slump. And the frustrating part too, George, is the fact that not only they lost again in Jacksonville for the ninth straight year, but a lot of these L's have kind of gone the same way. Some games have been closer, but also again, we're talking about during the streak times when Jacksonville was really, really bad. But last year they were owned, really the last 3 years in Jacksonville. 2021, 2022, 2023, different parts of the season, different quarterbacks, doesn't matter. They have still been dominant performances by the Jaguars, and it's not even the fact that the Colts can keep it close. It's the fact they can't even right now, George, compete in these games in Jacksonville.
I think it's 87-31, doing quick math in my head the last 3 years. But hey, at least they scored this time. Last year,
That's true.
Goose egg. So I guess that's progress. But I mean, it's a bad matchup, obviously. But I think today in particular, you've got a limited offense whenever Gardner Minshew's out there. That's just the way it's going to be. Jacksonville does a really good job of shutting down the run. They've done that twice against the Colts now this year. So you're going to have to rely on Gardner Minshew throwing the ball all over the field to win. And that's not ever going to be a recipe the Colts want or
No.
Probably ever going to be one that's particularly successful for them. So, and then on top of that, your defense sort of the same way. Perfect storm going back the other way. Jacksonville gets rid of the ball so quickly, it can limit the impact that front seven has. That's the strength of this defense. And then the Colts didn't stop the run today. And I think that's something they, at least early, they did late, but early on they were letting the Jaguars run too. And that's something they, against any opponent this year, they absolutely can't let happen. The secondary is going to have its struggles. We know that. You've got two rookies out there at corner. They had their good drives and bad drives today. That's the way that's going to be. I mean, that's what you expect to see from two rookies. But when you don't stop the run, you just add to all the struggles that you're having. So I think defensively, the matchup was bad. Offensively, the matchup was bad. And then on top of that, the Colts played poorly. So I don't think the analysis needs to go any deeper than that today. They played a bad game against a good team, and they were appropriately punished for it.
And especially in offense, George, I think you can boil down the Colts' offensive struggles to literally two numbers. Well, one is 55, number of pass attempts Gardner Minshew had today. That's, again, not something where you're going to be throwing and want to be pass heavy when your backup quarterback is starting the game. And the other is 4. And that's the number of turnovers the Colts had, all 4 by Gardner Minshew, lost fumble, 3 interceptions. What is, I guess, maybe the bigger concern for you, George? Is it the fact of how out of whack the Colts play calling ended up becoming, where it's 55 passes to a total of 17 runs called? Or is it the fact that you had 4 turnovers by your quarterback that led to the L?
I think it's 4 turnovers. I think that led to the other one, especially the first one. You look at the first 2 turnovers, it's 7-3 game. Okay, not terrific because you didn't convert in the red zone and they did. So now you're down by 4 points. You're getting the ball back. You just went on a long run, long drive to open the game. Let's see what's going to happen. And you fumble the ball away deep in your own territory, basically hand them a touchdown. So now you're in a 2-score deficit, which is, again, for all the reasons that we just talked about, not ideal. It's never ideal, but it's specifically not ideal here with the way Jacksonville's playing and the fact that you've got a backup quarterback out there. And then you go down the field at 14-3, and it's like, okay, at least maybe get a field goal, keep this a 1-score game, and you throw an interception. And they turn that into a touchdown. And now, like you said, it's a 21-3 deficit. I think those first 2 turnovers led to the imbalance in the play calling, and that led to the Colts just really never being able to get in this game. Fourth quarter, you kind of make a little run there, but I don't think Jacksonville was ever seriously threatened. And that's been the problem, down here during this losing streak. You do have some good moments, but not when you need them. You're not making the plays early. You're not making the plays that put pressure on Jacksonville. It's always the other way. The Colts seem to always be playing from behind here. And I think in particular today, those two early turnovers just put you in a hole that it was going to be really difficult to get out of.
And that's part of the reason why when you watch this offense, I like to equate it, like to think of it as kind of like Navy's triple option offense. Because when they're on schedule and they're in rhythm, it can work. Like we saw in the first drive of the game. Methodical drive right down the field. Underneath passes are working. The run game is getting a little bit of a push. And again, you're able to move the ball. Now, again, you want to see a touchdown there. You get a field goal. But okay, it's a nice opening drive. You take about almost half the first quarter off the clock. So you think, okay, you know what? Points on the board. Took a lot of time off the clock. You went down right away. That's a good way to start the game. And then as soon as things go off schedule, as soon as you get any sort of deficit, and as soon as you get behind on the turnover battle, all of a sudden, once you're off the track from that triple option offense, you see it's so hard for teams like Navy, Air Force, Army to come back and win games, because when you're trailing by 14, 21, 20, quick math, was it 25? Going into the fourth quarter, like they were down 31-6, like the game, George, at 21-3, the game's over. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing with Gardner Minshew that, that's going to, unfortunately, we're going to see now, it looks like for a while. We'll talk about Anthony Richardson's, the latest update with his health here in a little bit. But it's one of those things where if the Colts get in an early deficit, it's going to be very difficult, if not borderline impossible, with Gardner Minshew, a quarterback, to come back, because they're not built for coming back. They're built for staying on schedule. And as soon as a turnover or the point or the score kind of puts them off track, they're hopeless.
Once you go 2 scores down, and definitely 3 scores down, but once you even go 2 scores down, you're either going to need a big play like that 56-yard run that Zach Moss had last week, or you're going to need a defensive takeaway. And they didn't even get one of those until very, very late in this game. So, that's just the reality of how this team's going to have to play. I think it's going to be pretty obvious stuff. You've got to lean on the run game. You've got to have your defensive front play spectacular football, because they've got to be able to cover for everything on defense, and you've got to protect the ball. And they didn't really do any of that today. And then the result is what it is. Could they have called more runs? Sure. But it's not like the runs were working. I always have a hard time with that when people just look at the discrepancy and they say, well, you should have run the ball more. It's really easy to do after the fact, but the running game wasn't getting anything going. And it didn't get anything going against Jacksonville in week 1. The Jaguars have a really good, stout front. That's one of the reasons that they've been able to dominate Indianapolis down there for 9 years. And they were stuffing the run. They knew coming in that that's what the Colts were going to have to key in on, and they defensively were ready for it. The Colts don't have an answer right now for that, and then that's something that they're going to have to solve quickly. Because, again, as Chuck Pagano always said, you put a fire in this league, you start a fire in this league, you better put it out, because everyone's going to jump on that. Now, there's no reason for Cleveland not to come out with the same game plan next week.
2.6 yards per carry to illustrate your point about the run game. So you're 100% right. Part of it was just the fact that you're down 21-3 before you even get to halftime. So you got to call pass plays in order to get back into it. But the other part is, you're right. For the second game in a row, you're talking about less than 3 yards, or the second game in a row, I should say, against the Jaguars, both of them this year, right? Under 3 yards a carry. The run game really getting nothing going whatsoever. You're relying heavily on the pass, in part because the Jaguars, and to their credit, very quickly made the Colts on offense one-dimensional yet again. And it's so tough, again, to come back from that, especially when you're talking about a team led with your backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew as well. If you are watching, first of all, welcome. Appreciate you. It was the Blue Horseshoe podcast after another loss here to the Jaguars in Jacksonville, 37-20, ninth straight year. The Colts have lost to the Jaguars on the road. Comment below on YouTube. Want to hear your thoughts here on the biggest frustrations, biggest disappointment so far from this game. We'll get here into a little bit Anthony Richardson's future. We'll get into the defense. But I think, honestly, George, Wyatt Law kind of honestly outlines today's game perfectly. Colts laid an egg. Colts absolutely laid an egg. Now, coming to this year, right, we didn't know how much to expect from this team with a new coach, with the rookie quarterback. The fact that it's week 6, look, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. I think it's just honestly trying to be a little bit realistic about this season. In one way, a credit to this team that we're talking about the first egg laid of the season coming in week 6 and not earlier.
And it's at Jacksonville where they always do this. So that's why, yeah, it's concerning. There's a lot of things that happen today. They're going to raise red flags. But at the same time, this is what happens in Jacksonville every year. So, I think it's very important now to see how they respond next week against Cleveland, because that's what changes from year to year is how they respond to the egg they lay in Jacksonville. Last year, it was sort of the beginning of the end. This year, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I do think it's around the same time last year where things started to fall apart. It was a week later. They were 3-2-1. They're 3-3 now. They were 3-2-1 last year after beating the Jaguars at home in that crazy up-tempo, no-huddle, throw the ball every down game. And they went and lost to Tennessee. And a game felt a lot like this one. Score wasn't the same, but it felt a lot like this one the next week. And we know what happened from there. Chaos, a circus, an ESPN analyst taking over on the sideline, and you're 4-12-1. So, not to say that that's where this team's headed by any stretch of imagination, but I think you've got to go out against Cleveland and immediately make this game look like a fluke, which won't be easy to do. That's a very good defense over there that the Browns have as well. And a lot of the challenges that they had today against Jacksonville, they're going to face again against the Browns next week at home.
Just to double check, because it's eerily similar. Like I said, week 6 against the Jaguars, Colts won that game last year. 58 passes attempted by Matt Ryan in this one, 55 today from Gardner Minshew. Christine Cassidy does write in the chat, why is the play calling so out of whack or unbalanced, putting Minshew in a position to fail, he being Shane Steichen? We kind of talked about it before, George. It was a lot of time and score as a reason why you're attempting 55 passes. Again, when you're down 7-3, 14-3, 21-3 before halftime, you can't afford really to kind of keep it in first gear and just kind of slowly plod along. Part of your game plan, if you're up by that score or keeping it close, that's when you can really go on these long drives. But in order just to save time and get back in the game, you have to be able to push the ball. Hopefully, and I'm sure Shane Steichen's thinking this, maybe break a tackle, get some yards after the catch for some of these receivers underneath, and get a big play to come back instead of just, again, like we've seen, have a slow plodding offense. That's why you're talking about 55 pass attempts to just 17 run attempts. You also pointed out as well, it's not like the run game is very good. Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss got nothing going on the ground, 2.6 yards per carry. It was atrocious, right? But it's something we've seen too in Jacksonville. Before we kind of move on, Anthony Richardson, George, I want to ask you this about this just overall philosophy with the Colts here in Jacksonville. It's so bizarre, right? 9 straight losses in Jacksonville. Obviously, you have a backup quarterback of Gardner Minshew, so it's not like it's not a shock to say, right, they lost the game. Like the Jaguars are a better team. They have more talent and more is thought of them this year. But overall, is there I don't, maybe you tell me, I don't sense it is a mindset thing, but you look at it, it does feel like a lot of the consistent issues we see in Jacksonville specifically pop up year in and year out, even though you change a lot of the personnel, that there's not the same level of frustration and especially offensively incompetence, frankly, when you play the Jaguars and they come to Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah, no one really knows what it is, and the team has struggled to really give an answer to that too. Because the weird thing is, 9 straight losses on the road, but this is the first time Jacksonville swept the season series since 2017. So normally the Colts win the home game. They didn't, obviously, in Week 1 this year. Then that makes it even more strange, because you would think if you've been dominated that much on one side, at the very least, you'd be losing more often than not on the other as well. And it's not happened. The only thing I can say is every time they go down to Jacksonville, for whatever reason, they lose in the trenches. And really in the last few years, especially, when going back at least to 2018, that's what has marked the Colts when they're playing well. Winning that, that's why they beat Tennessee last week, because they went out and they won in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They have not done that in Jacksonville consistently. And I think that's the one thing you see over and over again. They didn't do it again today. And you see what the outcome is. So, why is it happening year after year after year? Is there a mental block? There doesn't seem to be. And for one thing, not very many of these guys were involved in very much of this streak. Ryan Kelly had been here since 2016, and Luke Rhodes. Everybody else was, maybe 2 or 3 at the most of these games. So, and Shane Steichen obviously didn't have that baggage coming in. The coaching staff, most of them didn't have that baggage. defensive staff was here last year, but the rest of them, it hasn't mattered. You have coaching changes, quarterback changes, personnel changes. It happens year after year after year down there. So, and it happened on a different continent. So, really anywhere other than Lucas Oil that they play them, it just seems like they can't get things going. And like I said, the one real overarching common denominator is turnovers. 4 of them today. That's the most in this stretch. 3 of them last year, at least 2 every other game in Jacksonville during this stretch. So you can't, it doesn't matter who you're playing. You can't turn the ball over like that and expect to win the game.
No, you're 100% right. Like, you look like the Colts deserve to lose today. They never really gave themselves a chance. They played just flat out bad everywhere. But like I said, especially the trenches, that's been a theme, especially in Jacksonville now definitely the last few years, but for a large part of this 9-game losing streak, that's been a real issue where games have been, for the Colts, lost down there. And it's also so frustrating, George, to watch this offense where they just cannot throw the ball past 10 yards. Again, we've known that, right, with Gardner Minshew. It's not a shock. But you see it today down the field. Outside of that one nice pass to Michael Pittman Jr., it's nice to kind of see him make a nice play deep. Otherwise, George, it is any pass that was deep was either incomplete. And honestly, incomplete was a win because when they were not incomplete, it was intercepted. And so it was one of those where it truly is 10 yards and in. It's ugly to watch. It's frustrating to watch. And if you're Shane Steichen, I can't even imagine how he must feel because half his creativity and half his playbook, I'm sure, is thrown out the window. Just because, again, you're working basically 10 and in, you can't get as creative and put guys in space when you are talking about just everyone so close to the line of scrimmage.
That's the challenge moving forward, too, because Jacksonville came out the same way they did week 1. And that's exactly what we expected to see. It's exactly what Shane Steichen expected to see. We were talking about it on the pod, beforehand, that there's no reason Jacksonville won't come out and play the same way they did in week 1. And that's why they came out passing early, because they were trying to open something up. And it worked on that first drive. They went down the field to get the quick passing game going. I think they were hoping that was going to lead to Jacksonville opening up a little bit. But to do that, you've got to hit some deep shots. And they just weren't able to do that until it was way too late in the game. And that's the fire that I'm talking about that they've got to put out, because you're going to see that every week right now. There's no reason for Cleveland not to copy that game plan. There's no reason for New Orleans the week after that not to copy that game plan. Now they've got to execute it. So you give everybody credit for that. You can come out whatever formation you want, but if you're not making the tackles, you're not winning the battle up front, it's not going to matter. But Cleveland's perfectly capable of executing a game plan just like that. They were taking it to San Francisco all day today, and that's one of the best offenses in the league. So you can imagine, the challenge that's ahead. But if the Colts can't consistently threaten the defense deep, they're just going to see this week in and week out. And that means the offensive line has to play that much harder. The running backs have to work that much harder. It's tough on everyone. And we'll see. I mean, maybe that 40-yarder to Michael Pittman is something they can build on. It's certainly something they're going to have to try to build on, because without it, it's going to be a slog all year.
Especially when you look, the game just went final. The Browns just beat the 49ers. So, that's going to be, and they allowed 17 points offensively. Now, San Francisco got banged up during the game too. But still, you're talking about now a defense coming to town next week that is one of, if not the best defense Colts, probably the best defense Colts are going to face this year. And like I said, you got to get these problems fixed soon, because what Jacksonville did today, especially winning the trenches, keeping everything in front of them, getting after Gardner Minshew, picking off basically any opportunity they had, the Browns are going to do that times 10 next Sunday. And if you can't, like I said, figure this out, whether it's getting the run established, whether it's opening up more deep shots and having Gardner Minshew, forget about just being accurate, George, get the ball further down the field and actually get some more arm strength on some of his passes. Do whatever you got to do, because it's going to be 37-20 was bad today. Next week, I think, George, there's a potential of talking about a podcast a lot worse. Now, maybe not offensively, because Deshaun Watson did not play again today, and that Browns offense is not exactly lighting it up. But from a Colts offensive perspective, it could be 20 points, could be the high watermark in terms of what they could do next week. That's going to be a really, really tough matchup here. And in large part because, again, you're playing with your backup quarterback. Why are you playing with your backup quarterback, right? Because we saw Anthony Richardson get hurt last week. And now, George, reports by Ian Rappaport, amongst others, that surgery is definitely now an option. Maybe, if you want to say, the clubhouse leader for Anthony Richardson in order to get his shoulder fully healed. And if he does get surgery, seems like, George, that will knock him out for the rest of the season.
And this is something that Shane Steichen alluded to Wednesday. When he was asked a couple of times, will Richardson play again this season? And he would not commit to that. And have you ruled out surgery? And he would not commit to that, that everything was still on the table. And again, I think they have to treat it this way. No matter what, I think that the worst thing that could happen out of this game is that they look at this offensive performance and rush the rookie quarterback back onto the field. We saw what happened with Andrew Luck when he played in 2016, and he kept having that, he didn't practice like twice a week. So it was clear the amount of maintenance that they were doing on that shoulder, but he kept going out there and he played through it, and he missed the entire 2017 season. We don't need to rehash that entire saga. Everybody knows how that ended. You really do not want to go down that road again. And granted, this GM wasn't here, not till the very end of that. This head coach definitely wasn't here. Jim Irsay was here. He remembers that. And I'm sure they've learned from that experience. And I think it's important that you do what's in the best interest of Anthony Richardson. Now, if that means not having surgery and he does come back in 4 to 8 weeks, then fine. But if this is something that is, best for him, and that's the way it's being framed, is, to get this surgery and get healed, yeah, there's going to be a short-term impact, and it's going to be significant. But realistically, and we've talked about this all along, what are you playing for this year anyway? Sure, you can get in the wild card race. You're fighting up a big hill now in the division. You're only 1 game deficit, but you now have, the tiebreaker in Jacksonville's advantage. And Jaguars look like they're starting to put things together. In the last 3 weeks, they look more like the team that was expected to run away with this division. So, sure, if AR comes back, you can get into that wild card chase. And maybe even with Gardner Minshew, you can figure out a way to scheme up some big plays, which, by the way, is going to be even tougher if you don't have Alec Pierce, who left this game with a shoulder injury. So we'll see how that plays out. But, I guess a long way of saying I would not risk the long-term future of this quarterback for a potential wild card berth this year.
I'm 1,000,000% with you. I'm glad you brought up Andrew Luck, because that has to be the guiding light, if you will, for this team, as you saw what not to do in terms of handling, Luck and making one shoulder injury 50 times worse by pushing through it. Whereas if they truly feel the best way to get this shoulder back healthy for 2024 and beyond is surgery and losing the rest of this year, it sucks. It's frustrating. It's disappointing, and makes, especially offensively, again, the rest of this year not useless, if you will, or pointless. But again, definitely for this season, right, we talked about wins and losses not mattering, because we want to see the development of Anthony Richardson. And obviously his development is going to be hurt by him not being on the field and only finishing 1 out of 17 games potentially this season. It's not great. But like I said, if that means, though, that in 2024 he's truly healed and at least shoulder-wise nothing wrong going into the season, you can't risk this getting even worse. And like I said, if it's to rush him back and have him play 4 games, like let's say they try to rehab it and take his time and he's still maybe not there, but they say, let's just get him on the field, like 4, 5, 6 games at the end of a year where the record truly doesn't matter, is not worth the long-term effects of possibly having him out or he just injured in 2024 and beyond. It's very frustrating. But at the end of the day, like I said, you have to take and put into focus the next 10 years and make that the most important thing at this point for Richardson is his future. And if that means basically cutting the cord and letting loose the rest of the 2023 season, so be it.
Absolutely. And that's the long-term picture here. Just look at the division. Jacksonville definitely has a quarterback who's a difference maker in Trevor Lawrence. Everybody sees that. Everybody knows that. It sure looks like Houston has one in C.J. Stroud. The Colts have to make sure that the quarterback they have that's a difference maker can stay healthy. And the best way to do that is to get him back in shape. Look, there's a lot of concerns with him going forward because of how beat up he's been this year. That, to me, only makes it even more crucial that you do not rush him back out there. You do not, maybe you can win the division. But if you do, you're going to do it with Gardner Minshew and a completely healthy Anthony Richardson down the end of the year. There's no reason to rush him back there even at 90% to try to get, like I said, a playoff berth out of this year, which would be, a gift. I mean, it's something that you did not expect coming in. It would be an absolute unexpected development. It would be great if he was healthy. He's not. He's been beat up. There's no reason to sit there and do anything other than whatever's in his best interest. And that does not necessarily mean surgery. I'm not a doctor, but it sounds like that's the way that they're leaning. The doctors are leaning, and then the Colts have to absolutely take that advice and do what's in the best interest long term, not for the next month, but for the next 10 years, like you said, of this quarterback.
We said it exactly a week ago on the post-game pod after the Titans win. The next time Anthony Richardson touches a football field in a game, he should be no less than 100% healthy. 85% no, 90% no, 95% no, 99% no. He has to truly be 100% healthy the next time he's on the field. Whether it's, we didn't know a timeline. It could have been 2 weeks from now, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, after the bye, which is, the bye is week 11, so week 12. But in this case, again, if that means the next time he's 100% healthy is week 1 of 2024, so be it. Fine. You just have to make sure you owe it to yourself, the organization, Richardson himself, the fans, everyone. You need to make sure the next time he touches the field, he is 100% healthy. I do like the fact, George, that early on, at least according to reports this week, the Colts are doing their due diligence. I think Rapport said at least 4 or 5 different shoulder specialists they've looked at, they've talked to, they're considering everything. It seems like, again, it was a hard and painful lesson to go through, but it seems like with Andrew Luck now, they are not ruling anything out and are open to anything and everything for finally settling down on what is the best decision for everyone going forward here. I like it and feel at least reassured a little bit that whenever Richardson does return, at least the Colts are handling this now the right way and prioritizing his health long-term more than anything else.
Yeah, they've handled it with patience so far. And really, that's been Chris Ballard's MO to a fault at times. He's always patient in every area. So I would expect him to be patient here as well. That's the most important thing. Figure out what you have to figure out with Gardner Minshew. If you have to go to Sam Ehlinger down the line, you have to go to Sam Ehlinger down the line. I don't think it changes much. I think he's got many of the same limitations that Minshew has and less experience, but he does have a running element. And if you have to figure out a way to work that in, I don't necessarily want to go the Tom Allen route and start rotating quarterbacks on every series. That obviously is not working well elsewhere here in the state. But if there's a package for Ehlinger that helps this team, then absolutely put it in there. Whatever you got to do, I don't think anything's going to be off the table. Be as creative as you possibly can be. Try to find a way to get some big plays, whether that's on the ground or through the air. And that's going to be their challenge because it's going to be difficult. Richardson was, while he was out there, one of the most explosive players in the NFL, had the biggest explosive player rate, in the NFL for the time that he's been on the field. So it's tough to replace that. And you're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to find ways to do it. It's a long year. I know this loss really stings because it brings back a lot of bad memories of years past, just the same way that the shoulder injury to Anthony Richardson brings back a lot of bad memories that people would rather not be thinking about right now. But that's the reality. That's where the Colts are right now. And I think they've got to just face it, understand where you are. And I think that's one thing Shane Steichen's really good about. I don't think he's going to kid himself. I don't think he's going to try to pretend things are working that aren't. I don't think he's going to try to, sugarcoat anything. But he's got to find a way. He and Jim Bob Cooter and Cam Turner and the entire offensive staff have got to find a way to be more explosive with what they've got on hand.
Speaking of which, Wyatt writes this, easier for me to say in the chat, and I think it's fair bringing it up. Like, you see Gardner Minshew struggle again in Jacksonville, did not play very well in a win, but was not great, let's say, an explosive in the win over the Ravens and the other game he started so far. At what point, George, do you go to Sam Ehlinger, Kellen Mond? Like, if I was Steichen, I would give Minshew until the bye. So that is, 4 more games, I think, off the top of my head. Before, right? Yeah, it was Browns, Panthers, Saints, and Patriots. I would give them at least 4 more games here to kind of try to see if they can get any sort of explosiveness and down the field, or just, forget about down the field, explosiveness on offense in general. I think if you want to make a quarterback change, it would be going into the bye, or I guess coming out of the bye, really, against the Buccaneers week 12. Would you do it sooner than that? Like, what's your leash right now with Minshew so far going forward, assuming, like we kind of are, unfortunately, that AR is going to be out for most, if not the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think you got to take into you got to take his experience into consideration, obviously, because it's much more than the other guys on the roster. But if he doesn't protect the football, I think that's the big thing. If he's going to turn the ball over the way that he did today, then you might as well get one of the younger guys out there and see what they can do. Because if you can't turn the ball over 4 times, I mean, that's just that's what sunk Matt Ryan last year. You know, I mean, it's what led to the 4-12-1 season. What were it? 32 turnovers, some ridiculously high number by the end of the year. And a lot of that was coming from the quarterback, interceptions and fumbles like today. So you've got to, if he continues to do that, then I would say the bye week is probably a good time to make that change anyway, because that's when you've got the extra week and you can sit down and look at it. And if he turns the ball over that much over the next 4 games, they'll probably be in a really bad position in standings anyway. So, you know, at that point, why not see what you've got with Sam Ehlinger? Why not give Kellen Mond, like you said, a look and see if he can, you know, reclaim his career here. But if Minshew can take care of the ball, and he's got to play to his strengths as well. And that starts with protecting the football. If he can take care of the ball and hit some shots when they are there, that's best case scenario with him. And then you run the ball with, you know, that double-headed monster back there of Moss and Taylor, and you get a better performance from the defense than you got today, and then that's what gives you a chance against a schedule that still is not particularly difficult. There are some tough spots, and Cleveland's going to be one of them. But it's manageable if the Colts can take care of business and play to their strengths.
The thing, too, about Minshew is just the fact that the offense is different with him running it. Again, not that Sam Ehlinger is any good. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Ehlinger is better than Minshew. But at least with Ehlinger, you can run the offense that you would run for the most part with Anthony Richardson, which honestly, George, if nothing else, I don't think it's going to lead to any more wins. But it could lead to some creativity sparks for Shane Steichen of just like, oh, here's an idea that we have that we ran with Sam. Let's see if we can institute it or, you know, alter it a little bit for AR when he comes back, again, whether it's end of this year or next year. And like you could still like kind of work on building the offense and putting more creative wrinkles in there versus when you do have, again, more a non-mobile quarterback in Gardner Minshew. It's like even the way Shane Steichen thinks about designing plays and being creative, it's different than you would think about an offense led by Anthony Richardson. So at least, again, even though he's not as talented as Minshew, at least Ehlinger does give you that aspect of, you know what, we can basically keep the offense the same with a less talented quarterback versus changing it up with a better, more veteran quarterback in Gardner Minshew.
Theoretically, same is true with Kellen Mond, you know, another athletic guy who can run and do some of those things that obviously Gardner Minshew is not going to be doing a lot of. I think a lot of it is, you know, really comes down to how long they're in contention. As long as they're still in the playoff picture and you can realistically see them, you know, contending for the division, contending for a wild card spot, I imagine Minshew's on the field, assuming he's not playing as poorly as he did today. But as soon as you're out of contention, if that point comes, you got to go look at the young guys. I mean, that's what any other team would do. Give them a shot, find out which of them could maybe be a long-term backup to Anthony Richardson, find out which of them you could maybe, if somebody plays well enough, maybe you can flip them and get something of value as well. So I think you really want to, you know, exhaust all options at that quarterback spot. And we'll see. It's up to Minshew. You know, if he can go out there and be that game manager that he was early in the season and move the offense down the field, then he can stick around and they can win games that way. But if he's going to go out there and put the offense in bad positions and turn the ball over, you got to make a change.
One other thing, too, before we get to the other side of the ball defensively, offensively, you mentioned before, Alec Pierce did leave the game with a shoulder injury. He was someone that, again, unfortunately kind of slammed down hard, looked to be favoring his right shoulder, did not return to the game afterwards. And that meant for the last few drives, it was Michael Pittman Jr. on the outside and no one else in terms of big physical frames. I think it was the last drive of the game. I saw Josh Downs split out wide. Josh Downs, not an outside receiver. Good for him, by the way, getting his first career touchdown. Happy for him to see that. But in terms of like the big body receivers, George, no one outside of right now going forward, it looks like Pittman Jr., no one outside of him can fill that frame. I think you can do one of two things, especially if Pierce misses time, which you do not know right now. We've not seen any sort of updates, especially timeline-wise, on the severity of the Pierce injury. That means I think you could do one of two things: sign and or trade for a receiver. Jerry Jeudy's been a popular name. I'm out on Jeudy. I don't think that's, to me, a wise move to spend resources on a kind of an underachieving, failing wide receiver that's been a bust so far. Or you can bring more tight ends in there, split them out wide. Try to put Drew Ogletree out wide and try to go 2-3 tight end formations here to put more size on the field. How would you kind of attack this, George? Again, when you see, we've already talked about the depth, especially outside receiver. Now, worst case scenario happens, Alec Pierce gets hurt. How would you kind of approach this and look at this now from a depth perspective?
They clearly have been looking at receivers. I mean, they brought in Amari Rodgers up to the main roster this week. They brought in KJ Hamler. They brought in Anthony Miller. They've been, going out there and looking at guys on the market. So I assume that will continue. It's been, I don't know if concerning is the right word, but it's been interesting that none of them have been those big body guys that you'd want to see. They keep bringing in more of those slot speed guys. There is, you would hope, some chance that Jelani Woods will be back relatively soon. And so that tight end idea does have some merit, because when he gets back, you can move some guys around, maybe use Drew Ogletree a little bit more, put them both out there together, use Mo Alley Cox a little bit more, whatever you got to do to try to get the bigger bodies out there. But I think it's another one of the many things you're talking about adding to the challenges here as you're trying to figure out ways to make plays down the field. And you don't have those big-bodied receivers outside of Michael Pittman, who had a good game. I mean, he had over 100 yards. He was making contested catches, had the big 40-yarder, but you can't do it alone. And so I think, one, you've got to hope that the Pierce injury is not long-term. We'll find out about that soon enough. If it is, I think you've got to go out and find somebody on the market that has that frame. And I'm with you on Jeudy. Name comes to mind for me is Chase Claypool. You saw how that went for the Bears. Oof. I think acquiring Jeudy would end very similarly here in Indianapolis.
I like that comp, minus obviously the personality and drama, at least outwardly, for the most part, that Chase Claypool has kind of brought with him. You're right, just big body receivers that are so far been a big fed zero in the NFL after being good college stars at Notre Dame and Alabama, respectively. Shane Steichen, after the game, confirmed, obviously, the shoulder injury. Did not know at the moment the extent of how long he'll be out for. But it's also a problem, too, when you kind of look at just, again, you kind of go through the box score scouting. Michael Pittman Jr., again, had that nice long catch as well, made some tough catches, but also not a great sign when your second, third, fourth, fifth leading receiver is Kylan Granson, Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, in terms of receptions and yards. And the leading receiver or second leading receiver in terms of receptions was Zach Moss, which also highlights the frustration of the underneath drop-off, dump-off passes that Gardner Minshew has been a specialty, or that's just kind of his specialty. Tough to move the ball when that is really his kind of go-to. Let me ask you this, George. As we flip to the other side of the ball here, would you say so far you've been disappointed with the defense?
No, I think they've played better than I expected. I mean, we knew that this secondary was going to struggle. They had no experience at corner outside of Kenny Moore, and that's gotten younger. I mean, it's to the point now where you're playing two rookies, which means you're going to be up and down from series to series and from snap to snap. That's just known. And I think the defensive line has played better than I expected them to, because I wasn't sure what you were going to get without Yannick Ngakoue in there, as that sort of bona fide, has a resume sack guy on the edge. They've been able to piece that together for the most part this year. I think Jacksonville took advantage of where the Colts are weak, getting rid of that ball very quickly. Trevor Lawrence has really feasted on the zone anytime they've gone to that, when they played him the last few years. He did that again today. That front seven, when it's playing in unison and playing well, has been really good. Today, they didn't stop the run, which I think was the most disappointing thing, because I think it helped open up even more for Jacksonville. But I think by and large, the defense to me has played better than I thought they were coming in, because I thought it was going to be a weakness. I thought they were going to lose a lot of shootout games. I really did. I thought if Richardson works out and is the guy that the Colts hope he is, there'd be a lot of 35-31 losses this year. The defense has, for the most part, held its own. Now, they didn't today, but I don't think anybody's going to walk out of the stadium today feeling like they had an A-plus game.
Right. No, you're right about that. And that's where maybe some of this is just skewed, right, in the sense that because of this offense is so Like you need so many things, honestly, to break right for this offense to score points and to win games that it puts extra pressure on the defense. So maybe that's where this mindset's coming from. But I was, especially today, disappointed with the defense in the sense I know they're not helped out by 4 turnovers, right? That's never going to help you out, including a few deep in their own end. So that's again not their fault when you're starting with a short field. Blake said, especially with the run, like you need. This game and week number 1, the Jaguars, they've combined for 68 points. The 2 highest point totals they've had on the season have been against the Colts so far, 31 week number 1, 37 today. That is the one area that's been a little bit frustrating, is just in this game specifically, not getting any sort of consistent pressure on Trevor Lawrence, not stopping the run. Like I said, I mean, that's part of the defense in the secondary, getting kind of playing the zone and getting picked apart by that. But it's one of those where because you expect so much, or you not expect, you needs the better word. You need so much from your defense that the margin for error is basically zero. Maybe you can allow one long touchdown drive, but otherwise you need them to pitch a perfect game. Like I said, no one was perfect today. Everyone stunk, equally, including special teams as well, allowing almost a big kickoff return to Jamal Agnew that really, I mean, the game is over anyway, but really would have put the nail in the coffin right there after the Colts kind of came to life a little bit. That's one where it's tough to balance because in one hand, you're right. It's like, look realistically, look at what they're working with, look what they have, the inexperience, especially in the back end. The other one is, well, if you want to win games and win this game specifically, basically need to be perfect. And they were far from that today.
Yeah, and that's, I think the lack of pressure today, again, I think Jacksonville does a really good job with that. They just get rid of the ball fast every time they face the Colts. And the Colts have that same trouble with them every time, whether it's here or there. They never really seem to be able to get a lot of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. That's got to change. I mean, there's no doubt about it. If they're going to win games going forward, they've got to get pressure up front. And I'm sure there's other teams, again, just like defenses are going to watch what the Colts can't do offensively. The offenses are going to do the same thing. You're going to watch this game. And you're going to try to get rid of the ball fast. And if your quarterback can read it quickly and get the ball out of his hand quickly, it's in your best interest to do that and then march down on them. I thought defense did a much better job in the second half and kept trying to give the offense chances to get back in the game, but didn't do good enough. And the 37 points at the end of the day, obviously, is not going to get the job done. Turnovers played a part of that. There's no question about it. But they're not going to be happy with this performance. I don't think you'll find a single defender out there who's going to be excited in the locker room after the game about the way things went. But and they've got to get better going forward too. And I think what you said, and I think the key in all that is the way the Colts are going to have to try to win games the rest of the season. They're going to need more from the defense, and I think that's where it's going to be tough because I don't know how much they're going to be able to deliver. I have a lot of faith in that front seven. I think the secondary will get better as the year goes on. I thought Brent's got better as this game went on. And quite honestly, there early on, he was getting beat a lot. Later on, he was starting to hold his own a little bit. I think you're going to see that, continue throughout the season. But you got 2 rookie corners. You're going to take your lumps. That's life in the NFL.
And that's what I hope today's about. Like you said, that's a great point by you. I think you're 100% right. Juju definitely got better in the second half compared to the first half. He was battling hard with Calvin Ridley in his face, just spirited, competing, got his first career interception as well. So it was a nice day for him, along with Josh Downs getting kind of their career firsts out of the way Sunday in Jacksonville. Like I said, you especially hope for both Jalen Jones and for Juju Brents. Like this is one of those learning experiences where we're talking about them in week 16 being a lot better than they were here in week number 6. It's an entire learning curve, learning development for the season. And hopefully this is one of those, like I said, look, school hard knocks are to happen, especially for a rookie corner, one of the hardest positions to play in the NFL in general. Really do hope that this is kind of one of those games that they definitely learn some good lessons for going forward. Because like I said, especially whether it's with eye discipline, whether it's getting fooled a few times, especially in the There we go. Holy cow. My microphone doing exactly what the Colts in general did today.
I thought it was on my end, so I turned the sound on and off at first because, usually is on my end. So I'm happy that it wasn't me, I guess.
All on me, George, just like the Colts. Dropping the ball. My apologies with that. I was playing with the mic. Must have come unplugged really fast here. Not a good showing. Not a good showing from yours truly. Not a good showing from this team. I will say, George, 2022 has definitely conditioned us to have podcasts like this where you frankly just get your teeth kicked in, and one of those where you just eat it. 2022 prepared us a lot for today.
Yeah, and it was like that. I mean, they got whipped today. There's no other way around it. They got beat offensively, defensively, special teams. They got out coached. They lost in every area of the game today. And now the question is, how are you going to respond to that? This team's been fighters all year long. I think that's been their greatest trait to this point. Can they get up off the mat against Cleveland team that's going to come in here red hot after that win over San Francisco and is going to present a multitude of challenges next week at Lucas Oil Stadium? Can they get up off the mat and go have a good performance again?
That's a good point, too, with the Browns coming in hot. Like, not just coming in with a great defense, coming in with a great defense off a big-time win over one of maybe some would consider the best team in the NFL, and the San Francisco 49ers, giving Brock Purdy his first career true loss in terms of games he started and finished. They are coming in after shutting down that 49ers offense. If you are, like I said, if you're the Colts, you need a big bounce-back effort here in order to just honestly compete and put points up on the board offensively here. They want to make this a game on Sunday. All right, final closing thoughts here, George, to do wrap up the Week 6 edition of the post-game pod here, Blue Horseshoe Pod. George, Bremer Ryan Hickey, Colts do lose 37-20 in Jacksonville. My last question to you is this, George. 9 straight losses now in Jacksonville, or on the road against the Jaguars, I should say. 8 now in Jacksonville, 1 in London. We tried to have a ceremony, if you will, to kind of get the bad juju out of the way on Thursday's pod. Did not work. Clearly did not work. At this point, I'm out of ideas. I don't know what has to be done. If there's maybe a sacrifice that has to be made, something's got to be done this time next year, George, to kind of hopefully prevent a 10th straight L in Jacksonville. But honestly, the Jaguars have just deprived me of ideas. I got nothing in terms of breaking the streak.
It's not going to get any easier. I mean, that's a good Jacksonville team. They got a good young quarterback. They're obviously starting to put things together. I don't think it's going to get easier to win down there. But I would start with having your starting quarterback healthy next year. I think that would be a good place to maybe begin to try to turn this around. But we'll see. It's been a long time, 2014, since they won down there. And right now, I don't see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, neither do I. That's the scary part. They are really starting, like you said, this year specifically starting to kick into high gear, but going forward here, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, the young studs they have on defense as well, Josh Allen, etc. They're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere for a while. This could be a tough one, George. This could be a very tough streak to break. The Titans one, again, not obviously as long, but 5 straight to Tennessee. That was a tough one to break. They were able to do that last week. So 1 out of 2 so far in these streaks, losing streaks against specific teams, at least got done last week. Unable to do it again this week so far. But yeah, it's going to be tough to break that streak next year. But even just now looking forward, it's going to be really tough sledding here for this offense next week against a damn good Browns defense coming to town that's going to pose a lot of challenges, led, of course, by Myles Garrett. This offensive line, we gave him praise 2 weeks ago, George. Rightfully so against Tennessee. They won that game by bullying, frankly, Tennessee on both the offensive and defensive fronts, especially offensively for the Colts. This is one where if the Colts want to have a chance against Cleveland, an early scouting report, they need their offensive line to do the opposite of what they did today.
Yes, they absolutely do. They need to get them out there. They got to win that battle up front. And defensively, they've got to win up front as well, too, because the Browns are going to want to run the ball. And if they don't stop the run any better than they did today, they're going to find themselves in a world of hurt. So we'll see. They've got the capability. We've seen the Colts do it. We've seen them come out and win these games in the trenches. They've got to be ready to do that next Sunday. I saw a couple comments, about AR and the sling. I wouldn't read anything into that. He doesn't like the sling. That's the biggest thing you can read into that. He came out for practice without it. Someone made him put it on when he was out there. I think the more important thing to take away there was the comment from the sideline reporter towards the end of the game, who talked to him before the game, and he said they haven't decided yet what they want to do, and I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't know what the medical opinions are going to say. They're obviously getting a ton of them, and they're going to try to find out what's in his best interest. If he can come back and it's something that is medically sound to do, then great. He'll come back and he'll finish out the year, play as many games as he can. If he can't, and the medical points towards missing the rest of this year, as much as that hurts, look, you don't. Again, the Colts, tried to manufacture things with Andrew Luck throughout the 2016 season. He was practicing only like 1 day a week. It got him an 8-8 season. He missed the next year. You don't want to repeat anything like that.
I'm glad you brought up the sling because you're right. Some people are talking about it. I'm with you. That to me, sling or no sling on the sideline is not going to indicate one way or another how close or far he is from a return to the field. And like I said, they look at the look at the media in terms of guidance for this. Where, like I said, Amanda Renner on the CBS broadcast said basically she talked to the AR, and it wasn't like I said. When you're saying, "Oh, we haven't decided yet," that could be, "Oh, well, glass half full." That means, hey, surgery still could not be an option. Which one way to look at it. Also, you can look at it glass half empty is that means, surgery you would assume is the last resort because that means he's out for the year. And I don't think anyone right now wants him out for the year. So that's plan D or E, whatever it is out of the options you have. But the fact that you can rule out right now the worst case scenario a week after the injury also means that the likelihood as we go further here, the likelihood of that becoming reality grows and grows and grows. So I'm with you. Ian Rappaport again puts out his report over the weekend about how he feels they're leaning towards surgery. The fact that right now surgery is being brought up a lot and by national media that's to me a bigger sign and something to grab onto more than whether Richardson was wearing a sling at practice or wearing a sling on the sideline versus having his arm still in a kind of a similar pose anyway, tied up, if you will, but not wearing it for a little bit. Is not going to tell you one way or another if he's close to returning or not, which is frustrating, right? Disappointing, but that's unfortunate right now, George, the reality we are in 2023. Okay, if you are a first-time listener, welcome. Appreciate you. Welcome to the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, which you're there right now. Hit the subscribe button. Also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Blue Horseshoe Podcast. We are here live after every game on YouTube exclusive. Right here, but also we do drop pods twice a week as well on Tuesday and Thursday. Get you set for each week's game. So check us out wherever you consume your podcasts. Blue Horseshoe Podcast again, YouTube Blue Horseshoe Pod right there as well. George, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. No victory cone, unfortunately, which stinks. I was in the mood for ice cream, so I guess I could still have ice cream. I mean, it's not like you have to deprave yourself. Maybe honestly, after that loss, ice cream could help more. Comfort the frustrations from that blowout loss compared to abstaining from the good old ice cream. So maybe we'll still have ice cream in the Hickey household after all.
You can still have a state victory cone.
That's true. Big win over UMass. Tough team. Tough game.
Covered there. I mean, why not?
Why not? You're right. There's always an excuse.
Victory, but you can still have the victory cone. It just won't have the victory.
Maybe I'll drop the cone. I'll just use a spoon. So that way, there's not one of so the victory cone is a little extra special versus maybe I'll just, settle for ice cream out of the carton like a savage with a normal spoon. That's what we'll settle on.
That seems fair.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We will talk to you on Tuesday morning right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.